everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Migrant Hope channel. I'm your host Charlene Assam, and in this video I'm going to be talking about what it is I do as an auditor and in the broader perspective of what it is that a CPA does. I know there's so much confusion about the fact that if you're a CPA, you're in tax automatically, and I get this all the time. I have to say, no, I'm a CPA, yes, but I don't work in tax, I'm in audit. So there's a very big misconception about that. So hence, I just want to clarify that and hopefully shed some light if in case this is the route that you want to take, or if you know somebody in your immediate circle who does what I do, at least you get to have a better understanding of what it is. Stick around and I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you. Hey everybody, so as we continue this video, I think the first and most important thing is when you hear the word CPA, what comes to mind? What do you think of? So CPA basically, it's an acronym and it stands for Certified Public Accountant. By the way, excuse the noise. I live in Brooklyn. It's quite noisy out here. But it stands for Certified Public Accountant. Now, if you are in the USA, that's the term that you would use. Typically, if you're outside of the country, you would use Chartered Accountant. For example, in Cameroon, they're all called Chartered Accountants and you're required to take the ACCA exam, whereas in the United States it's called the Certified Public Accounting exam, so the equivalent of that. Now, there's two main things that's in, if you're going to be a CPA, the two things that automatically you kind of do, even though those are the two main, mainstream, career paths that people follow. Granted, there is so much that you can do as a CPA. It allows for a lot of flexibility. And I can do another video on exactly, what you can possibly do with having your CPA license. But the main two things are you can either go into audit or you can go into tax. Hence, I say that you can be a CPA and not work in tax. So I went the audit route mainly because I'm not really a big fan of tax. It's not something that I desire, I enjoy as much. I understand it for the bare minimum as to what I have to get done, but it's not something that I'm very excited about. So hence I decided to go in the audit route. So regardless of whether you do audit or tax, I've talked about my CPA journey when I studied for the test. You're still required to learn. You have to have a basic knowledge of taxation before you can even sit for the test. There are a couple of classes and requirements that you need to take. So everybody needs to be able to understand at least what the tax code, you need to know what the IRC, the Internal Revenue Code, all that kind of stuff. And then while you're taking the CPA exam, there's also a section called regulation, which is also tax. So that was actually one of I struggled more with that section than any other section. But eventually when I retook it the second time, or rather when I retook it the first time, I passed it, and that ended up being my highest score out of all my CPA tests. So you still have to take it, but you don't do as much work as I know basic understanding of tax, provisions, all that stuff, but I don't have to get into depth as to what they do. That's absolutely not my route. So basically, as an auditor, right, when people hear what do you do as an auditor, what do you do every day? So basically I'll use the accounting term and then I'll try to use the layman term. And in accounting term is basically I provide reasonable assurance to the numbers which are presented on the financial statement. What that basically means is I look at the financial statement and I look at the company's books and I say, okay, if they're claiming net sales is this amount, if they're claiming their revenue is $5 million, I have to attest to the fact that what they truly have in their business is $5 million and they are not misleading people in the wrong direction. So we provide an opinion after we go through the whole audit phase and everything. We provide an opinion saying we have read this, we have worked through their whole process and their whole company, and yes, we can attest to the fact that the numbers which are presented on the financial statement are actually accurate and that's a true representation of the company. Now, it's very important that you have this in mind. I'm an auditor. I do not provide complete assurance. That's one thing that, because sometimes, people would invest in the market and say, no, this was signed by this public accounting firm and this and that. But no, we cannot audit every single number. We cannot audit every single thing that the company does. That's why many companies have internal audit departments. So because we cannot do that, we merely provide reasonable assurance and we base that basically off of materiality and all of that. Now, that's the accounting side of it. Now, layman's term is basically when you think of an auditor, try to think of it as somebody who comes from an independent standpoint. So I can come in and I can attest to the fact that, okay, if you are saying that you made $3 million this year, all I'm doing is I look at your books, I look at your numbers, look at your processes, all that kind of stuff, and yes, I attest to the fact that you made $3 million. In the most basic terms, that is really what audit is about. Now, within the audit realm, there are two main branches. So you can either be an IT auditor or you can be an FS, like financial statement or financial statement audit, which is, if you watch the video with Danielle, she does the IT side of it. So basically, we know that with companies around and everything, huge companies, right? Everybody has different IT processes. Because, for example, let's think about how the Walmart structure works. You go each day to Walmart and you scan like, oh sorry, the cashier is checking you out and they scan your products. There's an automation process that goes in which says, okay, for all Walmart stores in New York, this is how much. It kind of accumulates how much sales they make per day and all that stuff. So there's a lot of IT in the whole, or in many companies. So we as auditors, we have to kind of assess that IT process, because if we don't assess the IT process, I cannot be comfortable over the numbers, because the processes are supposed to make things easier, it's supposed to make things more efficient. But if I don't understand the baseline IT knowledge, if I don't understand what ERP system, which is your enterprise, I think it's enterprise resource system, something like that, your ERP system, which is sometimes will be like SAP, Oracle, all JD Edwards, which I think is Oracle actually. Yeah, so we have to assess that to be able to validate the fact that yes, their IT processes work well, so we can attest to the fact that the numbers which are represented on their financial statements are accurate. But one thing I would say is, as an auditor, you can either be in audit public companies or non-public companies. What I mean by public company is it's a company which is traded on the New York Stock Exchange, or it is traded on the stock exchange market. For example, a public company would be Google, would be Amazon, would be Facebook, would be Netflix, would be PayPal, would be Roku, would be Coca-Cola, would be Johnson & Johnson. We have so many different companies, right? You can actually go as an individual and purchase stocks on the stock market. So that is what, like, you know, that's what a public company does. And as far as auditing regulations, if it's a company, if you're auditing a public company, you don't necessarily, if you're auditing a public company, you have to also attest to the IT side of the business. So you're required to issue an opinion on the effectiveness of their internal controls. But if it's a financial statement audit, if it's a smaller company, or if it's a company which is just private, you don't have to necessarily do as much controls testing, which is all encompassed in the whole IT realm and everything. So I hope that provides a little bit of explanation. Now, tax is a whole nother different ballgame, right? Like, there's so much. Truthfully speaking, I cannot even attest to how much they do. But if you watch the video I did with Joseph, he talks a lot about what he does. So he's a tax associate. He does all the tax side. So the way I can attest to the audit side, that's how he can attest to the tax side of things. Now, the one thing that I would say is how we intertwine is, remember that if you think of your income statement, many of us know the word profit and loss statement is the same thing as an income statement, where you have your net sales, you have your revenue, you have your cost of goods sold, you have your gross margin, and then you subtract that, take away all SG&A, all selling, general and administrative costs, and you have your operating profit, and then by the time you take out taxes. So that tax portion, that is where we intertwine between audit and tax, because they have to validate the fact that the company is actually paying the right income taxes. And I didn't even know how complicated tax was, guys. Tax is a whole nother beast on its own, so I cannot even attest. But what I know is I have to still be able to understand some how they kind of like come up with like their tax numbers and all of that. So in my day-to-day job, right, if I'm working on a public client or just in general, we have to attest to the tax numbers, and we have our own separate like tax team that does work over that, because they have to also provide us with the right number, and they have their whole mechanism, everything that they do. So that's kind of how we get intertwined, only because we issue the opinion on the financial statements, but they give us much comfort and validation over the income tax line. So that's kind of how it works. And the last thing I want to say is, how does an auditor fit into the financial world puzzle? So like I talked about this, investing in the stock exchange, so many of us have bought stock, so many of us are interested in it. But as an auditor, because I'm an independent party, and what it means by independent is I have no financial ties to this company in any way, shape, or form. And there's a whole rule on independence. I don't even think you guys want to even get into it. But basically, I cannot have stocks in the company. For example, I cannot have stocks in like Coca-Cola, like Pepsi or something like that, and still be auditing them, because then I'll be biased, right? So we have to be independent. So because I grant an independent opinion as to the work that we do, and we issue an opinion over that, it says we have gotten comfort, we have done due diligence, we have done our own processes and methodology, and we have really assessed these numbers, and we can attest to it. So you as an investor would look, I would hope that before you invest in any company, you do your due diligence and really read their financial statements, understand the cash flow, watch the company for a couple of before just jumping right into the stock, even though it could be doing well at that time. But because I provide that backup, I provide that opinion and that independent eye to say that, okay, I attest to these numbers, that's how many investors feel comfortable in being in able to investing in companies. That's kind of how we fit into the financial puzzle. And there are so many other little tasks that auditors are required to do. That's just kind of a broad overview, and I hope that it helps, so that next time you hear or see someone who says, oh, I'm a CPA, you don't automatically assume that they are in tax, because it gets annoying to be explaining. So I hope that helps you guys, and I hope that that knowledge was helpful in some way, shape, or form. Sorry, I've been looking down because my notes are on my laptop and I'm filming with my phone. I hope you guys have a good day, and thank you, and stay tuned for the next video.